What is good, NIO family? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one, I'm going to break down what's going on with NIO stock, what you should be watching for going forward. I'm also going to break down what the news is saying about NIO that just came out, and why this is not the end of the world for NIO, as NIO is on a downtrend right now. It's not necessarily the end of the world because NIO does have a big potential catalyst that could turn all of this around. Before I break down anything about what that is and what's going on with the markets, let me just mention a couple of things before starting. Firstly, I'm not a financial planner. Make sure you take none of this as financial advice whatsoever. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button if you want to see more videos like this. It not only benefits me, it benefits the entire NIO community as a whole. And finally, don't forget about the Moo link. The offer ends very soon. Deposit $100 and you're guaranteed 5 free stocks with a $100 cash reward. Anyways, now let's talk about the market. What on earth is going on? So instead of getting a potential bounce like I was hoping for, the market actually slowed down a bit. We can see Tesla's down about 3%, SPY's down about 0.76%, and NIO is down about 5% for the day. It's starting to downtrend even harder. Now, I told you guys that NIO would be stuck between the 50 and the 200 EMA, and we'd be looking for which direction it broke in on these time frames. And NIO ended up breaking below, I think it was right here. We actually gapped below the 200 EMA, and that was a bearish signal. We came back up to get a back test before it continued to sell off, and overall NIO did start to show signs of weakness. Now, despite this weakness and despite this head and shoulders pattern, as NIO is now trending below the 1 hour and the 4 hour 200 EMAs, it is likely going to see more downside, but it's not the end of the world because you have to remember that in a little bit over a week, next week is going to be Friday, right? During the weekend of the week that's coming up after, we have deliveries coming out for NIO at the very end of June. And if NIO does very well, this could develop into a bottoming formation because when you look at NIO, we have this potential right here. There's this gap down here, like 7.8. It's going to likely come all the way back down to the 7.8 area, but it could always get a huge bounce if NIO does well for deliveries. So just be patient, watch this thing, drop for another like dollar or so. It's completely fine, but there is potential for a bounce if they do well. If NIO does not do well for deliveries, that's it. The stock price is likely going to see even more downside and break even below some of these lows we've seen here, back down to like $7 or something if they do very bad. So we need a good deliveries report to help NIO make a big reversal. Now, some analysts have come out like Zacks. They're coming out and talking about Tesla and Li Auto and a couple of others. They have said some positive things about NIO in some ways. They mentioned that in China has the world's largest auto market, and they extended their tax exemptions for a new couple of energy vehicles through 2027. And there are also tax breaks of more than $4,000 per vehicle. So that's some good news. There's also some of a green push that's going on over there. And the government is so far working very hard to help improve infrastructure and capabilities for the EV sector. So they have governmental support over there. Despite some sluggish sales growth, they're saying that there's going to be a lot of growth coming out during the second half of 2023, which aligns with what William Li Bin said. They did mention the price wars, which NIO initially said it's not going to be taking part in, but now NIO is a part of it by cutting some of their prices, and that's what helped NIO pump even more. Other than that, NIO is still holding up nicely. They have some nice tax incentives, and they're continuing to grow moving forward. We're starting to see this news right here from Zacks that's saying that China's intense push for EVs is a major booster for NIO. The ES6, ES8, and EC6 models are enhancing the firm's prospects. Once again, more people who are interested in different kinds of models all over the world are going to become more inclined into buying into NIO after very bullish news like this. NIO also had decent volume at 41 million. I'm not too worried about this week. It could slow down on volume. I think that's going to happen. Volume has been slowing down, so it's likely going to decline. And going forward, the price price ratio may continue to decline as well. So we're likely going to see some downside for NIO, more of a slowdown, which is completely normal as the price price ratio is coming down. And we are seeing an increase in the short interest. We have about over 14.91 million of these NIO shares being shorted. So I just want to note that this is very significant, and it's a big increase compared to before. And despite that, let me just look at some data for next week. We're not getting too much data for next week. We just have some consumer confidence reports and just a couple of things. Nothing too big is coming out next week for data. And lo and behold, I think we have another speech by Jerome Powell next week. I don't know why this guy is speaking again. So Powell is going to be giving another speech next week, which is pretty ridiculous. more Fed speakers. I don't see the point in why this guy is speaking again, but it is what it is. And then after that, we have more data like PCE coming out. So next week is going to be interesting. Not too many huge catalysts, not as many Fed speakers as this week, but Powell is going to be giving another speech again for who knows why. This could once again slow the markets down. He's been pretty hawkish. So I'm going to warn you guys that for the week, there might be some downside, but NIO still has potential for a big bounce by the time we approach the upcoming week, by the time we get into next week. All right, so that's what I have for this video. Basically, I want to just keep this one a little bit shorter than usual. Just to add on to it, I'm going to just talk a little bit about SPY and Tesla and just a couple of others before I officially end it. Let me just add that for SPY, technicals are looking a little bit weaker on this thing. It is continuing to downtrend. The 4 hour is still looking more bearish now that it broke below the 4 hour 50 EMA. It's going to likely continue to sell off, make an attempt to bounce, but I think that we have a target around 430. I'm going to be watching this 430 support. If we get a bounce off 430, if it manages to get that bounce, this thing will have the potential to, it could continue to uptrend quite nicely. If it breaks 430, there's going to be a lot more downside coming. It's going to make its way well into the 420s and start filling a lot of these gaps. So let me just show you 430 is going to be the key zone. Let me actually hide these and then do this. We're going to get rid of these extended hours. So looking at it, right, if it breaks 430, right, we have, first off, if you don't count a wick as a gap fill, because typically you wouldn't really count that, you could argue that there's this like gap area around 430. Whether you want to consider that filled or not, it's up to you. But this is a very important zone. If that breaks, there's another giant gap here, 422. And I think we have a very important zone very close to this like 420, followed by this like 419 support. There are more gaps below, but there's no guarantee it's going to come all the way down here. I mean, that's kind of a stretch. But I'm going to be looking at this next target at 422 if we get a break below 430. So we're going to be watching that carefully. I think by the time, it gets closer to that time, the 50 EMA on the 4 hour time frame without the extended hours happens to be very close to 430. That's going to be an important zone. If it breaks that, this thing is going to get rug pulled. If not, it has some potential for a bounce. But I am leaning more in the direction of this eventually coming down. It looked very weak. We had an attempt to bounce yesterday, even during today, and it ended up just failing again. So at this point, we have to be careful. Another thing that's big for the EV sector is Tesla, which is the biggest one. It's starting to slow down. There's a possible head and shoulders developing on Tesla now. And unfortunately, it's kind of hard to see. I have to bring up the extended hours so you can really see it. If you look at the 4 hour or the 1 hour or something like that, you will notice that Tesla had a left shoulder, a head, now a right shoulder developing. It just failed to break out, man. If it wanted to turn bullish, it had to break and hold 265. It failed to do so. So the odds are now favoring this thing starting to cool off a bit. It looks like a very bearish looking structure. And we're going to be watching the 50 EMA as support. If that fails, we have that gap all the way down at like 235 to be watching for. So let me just show you where that is. If it breaks below 247 this time around, it's most likely going to come down to fill that gap, in my opinion. 247 is going to be important, specifically 240 as well, but there's a giant gap down to like 235, which could get filled soon now that this head and shoulders is still valid. If it tries to break 265, there's a good chance it's going to make an attempt to improve. But for now, like I said, I would just be very careful with it. But until then, like I said, please remain calm, cool, and collected, guys. I will talk more about the market tomorrow, and I will see you guys in the next video. NIO to the moon alongside the whole market as the long term is very bright despite some potential downside to come. And peace out.